Hello everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how to play the Cold Imbued Barrage Rogue. So we're going to go over build, Paragon, all the stuff in between with Ubers, without Ubers, so let's hop on into it. Alright, let's go ahead and hop on into the build. So I have two different versions here. I have it with Ubers and without Ubers. We're going to go with the without Ubers first. So we have Crown of Lucian. This is going to give you a bunch of cooldown reduction. It's going to give you 15% increased damage, and resource cost is going to be increased by 30%, but this is going to go all the way up to 75% increased damage. And then when you factor in the fact you get really good shadow resistance from this, the lucky hit, the cooldown, the max life, this becomes really good because as a rogue you actually lack resistances. So shadow resist is just actually a lot pretty godly. I know some people I saw were doing Cowl of the Nameless. I personally think that helmet is inferior to Crown of Lucian, so I'm going to be running this one. Just nice damage boost, and even though it increases your resource costs, your Sky Hunter is going to give you back 60 energy. So if you look here, this is 30, and then you also have a 12% energy reduction in the Paragon, so you're going to end up coming out to like very close to break even, so it's very easy for you to keep your barrage up. Alright, next up we have Aspect of Might. So I put some more damage reduction on this. You can also go Concussive Strikes if you would like. I personally am more of just a fan of the Aspect of Might because I feel like rogues really lack damage reduction and tankiness in general. So whenever I make my builds for rogues, I always try to make it as tanky as possible, just to also make it as user-friendly for anybody that does decide to play this build. So we have +8 to Dark Shroud. Now the reason why we take the +8 to Dark Shroud is because if you come over here and you look at this, it's going to increase the amount of damage reduction you get for every single point. So you see here it goes up by 0.4%. So this actually is like putting damage reduction on there because when you come over and you look at our Umbrous aspect on our legs, we actually are going to get Dark Shrouds every single time that we crit. We have a chance to get a free Dark Shroud, so that's actually pretty solid. We don't even have to have this on our bar, and we're actually going to benefit. Not only that, whenever we have Dark Shrouds, we're going to heal for 10% of our max life when a Dark Shroud is removed. So overall, pretty cool. We also get some movement speed too for each Dark Shroud. Pretty sweet little combo there. All right, max life, resist all, total armor. The reason why we put the total armor here and we don't put it on the pants is honestly specifically because if you find a Tyrael's Might, this is going to make the transition to that way easier. That's the reason why I put armor on this. Then up to 25.4% chance to stun enemies just for another crowd control effect. Alright, so for the gloves, we have max life, barrage, critical strike damage again for the tempering, and then we have up to a 25.4% chance to daze. We're going to put high velocity aspect on this. Barrage arrows now pierce through one enemy, and it has 25% increased attack speed, so it's going to make your barrage hit more enemies. It's going to be pretty awesome. Alternatively, another tech you can do here is if you want to run rapid fire runs a similar setup. So if you found a greater affix to core skills, it would give you the ability to switch between the two setups very easily. Where all you have to really do is change stuff. So if you're the kind of person that likes variety of builds, it's another thing to point out. Go ahead and put your greater affix and your masterworks on barrage for that, just so you can get a bunch more damage. So on the legs, like I said before, critical strikes have up to a 60% chance to grant a free Dark Shroud shadow. We're going to go Smoke Grenade cooldown reduction, Second Wind. If you don't know what Second Wind does, it's right over here. So every 100 energy you spend grants 75% of your max life as a barrier. So this just gives you a barrier and really, really, really solid stuff here. Okay. Now you want max life, armor, and resistance to all elements. Now the thing that does kind of suck about this is when you get Tyrael's Might, you're not going to need the resist all. But before you get Tyrael's Might, you will need it. So you will end up having to find 2 pairs of pants. Whether or not you do like Ubers or not, or sorry, whenever you get an Uber. So we want Smoke Grenade cooldown reduction and then +3 to Second Wind. So some people, now when it comes to the Smoke Grenade and why we use it, so we're using an item called the Umber Crux, and that is going to drop every single time that we drop our Smoke Grenade. Now, some people will increase the duration of Smoke Grenade but I personally don't really, I personally don't care for that. I actually would rather go cooldown and make sure that I am able to, get this, completely maxed out. So some people would just go a bunch of duration here instead of smoke grenade cooldown reduction. I prefer smoke grenade cooldown reduction in combination with countering smoke grenades. So this is going to make it to whenever you hit an elite enemy with this, it's going to reduce the cooldowns, or a boss, it's going to reduce the cooldown. And then if you have really good CDR rolls and you have this down to where you're able to pretty much, put this down like all the time, right? Then you can switch one of these over to the duration. But before that, I prefer to just go smoke grenade cooldown reduction. Okay, so moving right along onto the boots, we have movement speed, maximum life, +4 to dash. I put +4 to dash on this simply because it reduces the cooldown by a little bit. So you can see here 0.738. If we just take a point out here, it goes down. So it doesn't do it by a crazy amount, but alternatively, you could also just go something like dodge or something like that, because there's not really a whole lot of good options here. Or, obviously if you need resistances and you don't have good resist rolls, the way that I get my resistances, you guys don't have to do it that way. If you guys have a different way you want to do it, by all means, you can put resist on your boots. You could put a resist on your legs, right? Like there's multiple ways to get to the 70%. This is just the way that I like to do it when I'm set up like this. All right, then I go ahead and put the greater affix on movement speed, and then all the masterworks onto movement speed. Now onto the bow. So Sky Hunter, this is a massive part of the build. So first off, it has a chance for marksman projectiles to cast twice. So this makes it to where sometimes your barrages are just going to cast twice, and it actually happens quite frequently. So you'll be sending off just tons of barrages. You'll have a massive amount of critical strike damage. We want our greater affix on the critical strike damage, and then we want the temperings on the chance for projectiles to cast twice. The reason for this is because it's just going to make the projectiles casting twice happen more often. And then the greater affix on the critical strike damage is because you can't actually go past 99%, I believe, when it comes to the projectiles to cast twice. So by putting this on this, you get a massive amount of critical strike damage. And critical strike damage is actually much better than like something like Dex because of the fact that we have a bunch of multipliers in this build. So if you read the text here, it says the first direct damage you deal is a guaranteed crit. When you consume stacks of precision casting a skill, that skill gains 60% increased critical strike damage and you gain 60 energy. So whenever you consume your stacks of precision, which is your key passive, you will just do a ton of crit damage with this, just an absolute ton. And then whenever you gain the 60 energy, that's going to help you get back. Whenever you do the whole precision consume thing, that's actually going to help you get back energy to make up for the Crown of Lucian. Now, the Crown of Lucian becomes easier to use with this when you have a Ring of Starless Skies, but I'll go over the Uber version in a second. Go ahead and throw some critical strike damage gems in there. On the amulet, again, we have a very hard amulet to get, but if you can get 2, it's fine. But you want Frigid Finesse and then Weapon Mastery, Unstable Elixirs. Frigid Finesse is the one that you really, really want. And then you can have any combination of the other 2. It'll just be a minor difference. But you want to try to get your Greater Affix on Frigid Finesse and then all of your Masterworks onto Frigid Finesse. There's a lot of damage in this amulet, and this is an issue I have with most builds in general right now with amulets, is there's way too much power in amulets. A good amulet is literally like tiers of damage. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have, if you're struggling to do a T7 or a T8 and you have a bad amulet, no joke, literally fixing your amulet could potentially give you the damage to be fine in there. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your damages. All right, and then we're going to go Aspect of Branching Volleys, though this increases the damage of arrows that ricochet from Barrage from 40 to 120%, and then Barrage's arrows have a 90% chance to split into 2 arrows whenever they ricochet. So again, it just gives you, you'll just be blasting the whole entire screen whenever you're playing this build. All right, so then we're going to go Band of the Dark Dance. Now, some people go Aspect of the Expectant. I've seen that. I've seen a couple other things, but this is actually what I like. Every 5 seconds, your next core skill is going to cost you life instead of primary resource. So that actually helps since we're using the Crown of Lucian, and it's going to make it deal 80% increased damage. So you're just out of nowhere just going to see these massive big bursts. Whereas with Aspect of the Expectant, which you can also run here, you have to use your basic skill 3 times in order to really get maximum value out of that. So yeah, but anyways, you're going to want attack speed, dex, critical strike damage. Cold Imbue lasts for +6 casts. You want to get all of your masterworks on that, because by having more cold imbues, whenever you are cold imbued, that is when you deal damage, right? So you need to make sure that you have this. So, and that's another thing too. If we're just, kind of talking about like, why are you not doing damage, why you might be having problems, masterworking your rings in this build is massive. Like, getting good masterworks on your rings is massive. Like, because you press this and all of a sudden you have, what's that, 6, 12, 15, plus the already, yeah, so you get 17 imbuable attacks, right? So it's like, that is just absolutely massive. By the time you even use all those attacks, this will most likely already be back up. So keep that in mind. That's another big thing. Like, the rings and amulets on this build are insanely important for clearing higher tier hordes and just doing things like that. Yeah. So now on to the next one. We have the Cold Clip Band. So I actually like this one a lot. I saw some people getting rid of this for like Aspect of the Expectant and holding on to that and doing that kind of thing. But I actually would rather have this, because your basic skills are always cold imbued, which is really nice, because when they're cold imbued, you can chill enemies, and it actually makes it easier to potentially freeze enemies, stuff like that. It's like another form of CC and defense, and you're only losing 10% damage from taking this over Aspect of the Expectant, and then you are going to deal 20% increased damage to enemies who are chilled or frozen. So yeah, so it's pretty good in my opinion. So attack speed, dex, critical strike damage. Put your greater affixes on the crit damage, and then your masterworks onto cold imbue. So what Condemnation is going to do here is you have increased basic attack speed, you have a chance to make enemies vulnerable, you have damage per combo point spent, you have dex, and then your core skills are going to deal 40% increased damage when you spend 3 combo points. And more importantly, your basic skills using this weapon have a 50% chance to generate 3 combo points. And this is why I don't care for Aspect of the Expectant a whole lot, is because of the fact that you don't need to attack 3 times. I don't like a lot of, like, this procs a lot. It procs a lot, like a lot. It really makes like Aspect of the Expectant like a little awkward to play with, because if you're not, like whenever you don't have Condemnation, I think Aspect of the Expectant becomes a decent amount better, because you'll be attacking with Puncture 3 times before you actually use your Barrage. But there's gonna be times you're just gonna go Puncture, Barrage, Puncture, Barrage, Puncture, Barrage. And you'll end up doing that a lot. So we're going to put our Masterworks on basic attack speed, and then our greater affix on dexterity. You can also put the greater affix on basic attack speed. That's fine too. I just figure this is a way to squeeze out a little bit more damage. So the Emperor Crux is a really interesting item. It puts out a shade token whenever, or sure, not token, totem, whenever we put down a smoke grenade. And then whenever you hit the shade totem, it's going to deal how much damage it takes, like 20% to all the enemies around in like a pulse. So that's also why I really like to make sure the cooldown on this is reduced. It also gives Innervation, which is going to give you some energy back, which is nice. Go ahead and put your greater affix on dex, and then your masterworks onto dexterity for this as well. But that's all. But when it comes to the totem, being able to reposition it is definitely better, I think, than just having it last longer. Mainly because if you can reposition it, then when you're trying to speed farm, you can move it more. Whenever you're in Infernal Hordes, you can move it more, and that's really the reason why I do that over duration, where it'll make it stay at one place longer. It's just because of the fact that I know I'm going to end up one-shotting things, and then I'm going to burst it. But this is an absolutely goated item. You will absolutely love using it. It's definitely one of my favorite rogue items, for sure. And you get this out of the Infernal Hordes, so it's really not that hard to farm anyway, so that's also pretty cool. So really solid item there. So that is going to be all the items for the regular build. Alright, so when it comes to the Uber one, I am doing Ring of Starless Skies, Dark Dance. You can also swap this out for the Cold Clip aspect, depending on what you want. If you're going for the maximum % damage, it would technically be Dark Dance, but Cold Clip aspect I find is actually pretty useful. Don't really recommend Aspect of the Expectant, but Dark Dance or Cold Clip. Ring of Starless Skies, this is going to increase your damage by up to 50%. Go ahead and put your ranks, your greater affix ranks onto core skills, and your masterworks onto that. And then again, Andariels might here, so greater affix on damage reduction, and then masterworks on damage reduction. This just makes you incredibly tanky. You just become a behemoth, you also don't have to worry about all resists. You also get 10% more all resists. Just honestly, just kind of wild. And then again, you know, the fact that this reduces your resource costs, increases your 50 by up to 50%. These are just absolutely crazy for the build. You can't run the Harlequin crest because Crown of Lucian is just too important for this build. But these are going to be the 2 Ubers you can run. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop on into the skill tree. So, I mean, when it comes to the skill tree, there's not really a lot of variation, I feel, of what you can do with this. But I'll show you guys. I'll switch over to no Ubers one. Yeah, it should be, it's going to be roughly the same. But so, puncture, enhanced puncture, primary puncture. Oh, sorry, no. You want fundamental puncture. This is going to make everything vulnerable. I don't know why I clicked that one. This is going to make everything vulnerable. It's really, really solid. You're going to have things vulnerable all the time, and it's also decently ranged, and you gain 2 energy whenever puncture damages a crowd-controlled enemy, so that also helps with regen as well. So make things vulnerable, get regen. And then we have Barrage. This is our main ability here. It just does a ton of damage. It also makes things vulnerable, and then Barrage Ricochet's chance is increased to 100% for arrows that damage a vulnerable enemy or critically strike an enemy. So we crit all the time with Sky Hunter. So we combo extremely well with this. And then we have Sturdy for close damage reduction. Siphoning strikes, critical strikes against close enemies are going to heal you for a little bit of health. It's just a nice little one-pointer thing to take there. Coming on down to here, we have Caltrops. Whenever they stand in it, they're going to take up to 45% increased damage to you. Now, it is a little bit harder to keep them in there, but if you take methodical Caltrops, this is going to chill them and slow them inside of it. So a lot of the time what you'll see is you'll use Smoke Grenade and then Caltrops, and then that will you'll end up just bursting things with your Shade Totem and then the Caltrops damage. Then we have Weapon Mastery. This is going to be 24% increased damage to vulnerable enemies with bows. Things are always going to be vulnerable. And then we have Dash, Enhanced Dash. Methodical Dash gives you another dash charge, reduces the cooldown by 3 seconds, so you can do it more. Then we have Unstable Elixir, so using a healing potion is going to stun surrounding enemies, and then it's also going to increase your damage by 36%. Now that's assuming you do have another 3 points, otherwise it's only going to be 18%. Trick Attacks, so dazing or stunning an enemy is going to increase your critical strike chance by 6%, and your critical strike damage by 6% up to 36%, so that's going to be pretty solid as well. And then Rapid Gambit, so whenever you evade through an enemy, it's going to daze them, and it's going to give you a little bit of evade cooldown reduction. This also combos really well with Concussive Strikes, so you can get more evades as you're dazing things if you do that instead of Aspect of Might. Okay, so moving right along, we have Dark Shroud. Enhanced Dark Shroud, Subverting Dark Shroud. Again, this combos with your Umbrous Aspect to give you healing whenever a Dark Shroud is removed, to give you damage reduction when you have Dark Shrouds, because you get them. You have a decent chance to get them whenever you're critting, and you do end up critting a lot. And then you also get movement speed for each active Dark Shroud, so that's pretty cool. And it also has a chance to not be consumed. Then we have Smoke Grenade, Enhanced Smoke Grenade, and Countering Smoke Grenade. This gives you 5% cooldown whenever you throw it onto an elite enemy, because you really don't need to use it on white enemies. You really should only be throwing the Smoke Grenade down on elite enemies. It also increases the amount of damage they take from you by 25%. So overall, pretty solid. And then, yeah, and then it also dazes them. So it's just the combos with the Rapid Gambits decently well. So we have Exploit, 18% increased damage to healthy and injured. Malice, 9% increased damage to vulnerable. And then you have 9% increased damage to knock down enemies. And then those bonuses can apply simultaneously, but we don't really have a whole lot of knockdown, if any at all, in this. So then we have Cold Imbuement. This is going to be your bread and butter. This is going to be what makes all your abilities just do a ton of damage. So Cold Imbued skills deal 20% damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and you double that bonus against frozen enemies. Cold Imbued skills have a chance to make things vulnerable. And then, yeah, the mixed Cold Imbuement for more damage. So come over here. We have Frigid Finesse. You deal 50% increased damage to chilled enemies, and then you deal 100% against frozen enemies. So you can see right here, like, why having Frigid Finesse is so important, right? Because you're talking about 70% extra damage to frozen, and then like 35% to non-frozen. Like, that's an insane amount of damage to be getting from an amulet. All right. Then we have Innervation. This gives you energy back as a lucky hit. Alchemist Fortune, increase your lucky hit chance. And then Second Wind gives you a nice barrier you have so every 100 energy you spend will give you a nice barrier, which you're going to spend 100 energy very quickly because you have the Crown of Lucian on. And then Adrenaline Rush, while moving, you gain 15% energy regeneration. And then Precision, when you cast a Marksman skill, you gain a stack of Precision. So when you reach 4 stacks of Precision, your next Marksman ultimate or core skill is guaranteed a critical strike, deals 50% increased critical strike damage, consuming all stacks. This damage is further increased by 15% of your critical strike damage bonus. So you can look here, our bonus is 442% because we are putting all of our crit damage here. So it's just like that's why you want to run crit damage on everything, is because we just get so much value from like all these different things that do crit damage. When it comes to, there is no difference between the builds when it comes to with Ubers or without Ubers. It's still going to be exactly the same. So now we go over to the Paragon here. So when it comes to the Paragon, I make my Paragon boards tankier. So you do have some options if you want more damage to swap. So for example, I'm running Ranger here. While wielding a ranged weapon, you take 10% reduced damage. You can also instead run something like Canny, increase all the non-physical damage an enemy takes by 10%. You can get rid of that for that. I also run Turf, so if something, in the event something does get close to me, I believe I have Turf over here as well, you get 10% damage reduction from that. You can replace that as well with, I believe you can replace that with something like, heck, you could even go Diminish there as well if you want to take 15% reduced physical damage for vulnerable enemies. That's also pretty solid. It's also a pretty solid defensive one there. And then you have Devious. That's the one I was looking for. So when you hit an enemy that's applied by crowd control effect, it's going to increase the damage they take from you up to 10%. And honestly, looking at this, I actually think this is better. Hold on, let me switch this to Diminish. There's actually a reason why this is much better for damage reduction. So I'm actually going to swap that. Congratulations, you guys see me realize I made an error there. Yeah, this is going to be much better than Turf because everything's vulnerable all the time anyway. So, that being said, let's go ahead and keep on rolling here. So this one is, so this one we have no Ubers. So if you are just now leveling up, you want to go this way if you're leveling. Keep that in mind. You're going to want to level, and you're going to want to take all these cold resist nodes. This is kind of a final board, assuming that, you are level 100. But, yeah, so we come up here. We're going to get some max life, pick up Ranger, come up here, get some extra damage, come up here, get damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, and the exploit weakness. We are going to end up using like 7 or 8 glyphs in this build, and we are also going to be picking up a ton of legendary nodes in this build. So, keep on going up here. You want to wrap down around here and pick up this cold resistance. This is going to be very important if you do not have any Ubers yet, like you don't have Tyrael's Might or something like that. And I'll show you the difference between the Ubers once I'm done going through this, because the difference between Ubers and non-Ubers is very slight. It's just, we get rid of this, and I'll show you guys what to pick up. So, exploit weakness, hitting a vulnerable enemy has up to a 60% chance to increase your damage by 1%, up to 25%. At 25 stacks, this bonus remains for 6 seconds before expiring, so it's just another damage boost. We come over here, pick up some vulnerable damage, get combat. Skills that critically strike restore 12% of their energy cost. So this is going to help you deal with the Crown of Lucian. It also gives you a bunch of crit damage, which is also going to stack with your precision. And do stuff like that. It's really, you get a lot of value out of max. I'm not generally someone that likes to max out glyphs because I think you get more value out of just picking up more other stuff. But this one, you do get a lot of value out of maxing it out and getting the full 194% crit damage because of the fact of Sky Hunter plus the precision bonus damage, stuff like that. Then you can come right around over here to Tricks of the Trade. We're going to pick up Control. This is going to give us a 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen enemies, 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled, as well as some extra damage to crowd controlled enemies. Extra bonus damage to elites. Come over here. We're going to get 30% damage to distant enemies. We're also going to pick up 6% damage reduction from distant enemies. So pretty nice little boost there. Then we have Tricks of the Trade. Your marksman skills are going to grant you 25% increased damage for 8 seconds. Your cutthroat skills grant your marksman skills 25% increased damage. You can see here, I believe puncture. Let's see here. Which one of these is a cutthroat skill? Oh yeah, sorry. Your dash is your cutthroat skill. Yeah, your marksman skills grant your cutthroat skills damage, and then your cutthroat skills are going to grant your marksman skills damage. So whenever you dash, it's going to give your tricks of the trade. For some reason, I was thinking puncture was the cutthroat one. No, it's dash. Gosh, I'm crazy. I'm going crazy here, yeah. But this is going to give you 25% increased damage to that whenever you dash to your barrage. Okay, come over here to Cunning Stratagem. So your non-damage combo point bonuses are going to be increased by 33% when you spend 3 combo points. So it says non-damage combo point bonuses. So it says, notice here it says 7 arrows, 9 arrows. That's like a non-damage one. So I believe that is increased by 33, or being increased by 33% from Cunning Stratagem. So pretty solid there as well. Now, when we come down here to Eldritch Bounty, when to pick this up, when you attack with an imbued skill, you're going to gain 3% maximum resistance and 20% increased damage for that element's, or that imbuement's element for 9 seconds. So we always take it because it's just 20% increased, cold damage. So, yeah. All right. Moving right along. So now we're going to come up here into Cheap Shot. So Cheap Shot is going to give us 5% increased damage for each nearby enemy that is crowd control, which is going to be all the time, so up to 25%. A nearby staggered boss provides the maximum, so then when you stagger a boss, you get the max out of that. Fluidity, when you cast an agility skill, you're going to get 10% increased damage and 15% increased energy regeneration, again helping us offset the Crown of Lucian there. So that's going to be pretty sweet. You come over here, you actually get a bunch of damage reduction from slowed enemies. Keep in mind, you do want to make sure that you take this strength node right here because it gives us our secondary bonus by taking that. That's the reason why I have this kind of random strength node being taken. So then we move on to over here where we're going to take Deadly Ambush. You deal 22% increased critical strike damage to enemies affected by your trap skills. So Subterfuge, I believe Smoke Grenade becomes a trap skill whenever you, because of the Umbercrux? Yes. Yes, you may only have... Oh, no, sorry, no, the Umbercrux counts as a trap skill. My bad, yeah. So the Umbercrux is going to actually count as a trap skill, so that's going to give you a bunch of damage there. All right, and then, Diminished, take 15% reduced physical damage from vulnerable enemies. So you can see this is, it gives you some tankage and stuff like that. So now, if we're just going to swap this over to the Ubers, and I'm going to show you guys the difference. So the main difference is we don't need to think about resistances. So we take the points out of here and we're able to move them over into things like this, so we actually can get more damage reduction from distant enemies. I know this seems odd, but when you go into Infernal Hordes, the Desecrators are kind of a problem, and they actually have a ranged attack that can one-shot you if you get hit by them. So once you get up to higher tiers, you're going to notice this. So the damage reduction from distant enemies is actually pretty solid in the pits, just because of the fact that the Desecrators right now are just so darn strong. And the other thing we get is if you come over here, we're actually going to get damage reduction from enemies from trap skills. We are lacking a little bit of strength, but still 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6, 8. You're still getting 8% more damage reduction. So you're getting a bunch more damage reduction there, and that's really the only difference. We also are able to put a couple points over here into Imbuer, just because we have 2 extra points. So to get a little bit of extra imbued damage as well. This is going to be, obviously the better version because we don't have to go over and take, cold resilience and stuff like that. We do lose a little bit of max life, but it's not really that big of a deal because I honestly recommend doing the Fortitude Elixir whenever playing this build. That's my recommendation. You'll end up having about 30 to 33,000 max life, I believe, with this build. So that's actually quite a lot. And if you also are feeling like you don't have enough max life, feel free to swap out the dex on the rings to max life and just go attack speed, max life, crit damage. That'll be another way to make you tankier as well. But this should be, for a rogue, obviously it's not going to be druid levels of tankiness, but for a rogue, this is going to be a relatively tanky build that you shouldn't really have survivability issues on as well. Okay, so... But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a better understanding of how to play just the regular old Barrage Rogue. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, come see more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.